Okay.
You are all set.
And can everybody see my screen? Give me a thumbs up.
I can see it, but you're
Sweet.
not sharing the slideshow.
Okay, let me try that one more time. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to try it again. Please hold. Does that work? Does everybody see the title slide?
That's better.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Well, good morning and welcome everybody. This is QM Balloon Animals, twisting the rubric to meet your needs. And if we were in person, we would probably have Penny actually make a balloon animal.
I have a balloon here, so
we're going to see what we can do. But my name is Bethany Simunich, and I'm going to advance the slide to the welcome. I'm QM's Director of Research and Innovation. So happy to be with you all here today on the second day of our conference. And I'm joined by Penny. Penny, do you want to say hi?
Hello.
Penny is the Senior Instructional Designer Extraordinaire at Penn State and Penn State World Campus. So very, very honored to be here with her today and making this co-presentation. Okay, so objectives, it's QM, so you know we have to start with our learning objectives. So hopefully by the end of this session, you'll be able to discover some new variations for the QM rubric and how to use it and twist it and flex it to meet your institutional needs or your individual faculty needs, and maybe in new ways that you haven't considered before. We're also going to look at quality through different lenses and in different ways, because that really coincides with how we can flex the rubric, to meet our needs and to meet our goals. And we'll also talk more about those variations of QM rubric to meet your needs at the home institution that you're at. So just a little bit of an overview before Penny gets started, because she's going to do a deeper dive into how this looks at her campus at the Penn State. But using the rubric for review, there's some basic options there. So just to orient us all to that, you can really tier reviews and make them work for you at your institution or at the individual level according to where you are and what your needs are. So there is the self-review, and the self-review is something that is tied to your MyQM account. So if I'm the individual faculty member and I just want to get a sense maybe for where my course is, not ready for an internal review, not ready for a full review, I just kind of want to see where my course is, what standards are currently met. Maybe I'm doing this in conjunction with the IYOC, Improving Your Online Course Workshop. But a self-review is really just what it says. It is for you alone. So nobody else sees that. And so if you're at the place and in the space as an individual faculty member where you just want to look at your course and not really share that with anybody else, the self-review is a great option there, and it's a great place to start. That then blossoms into other options like internal reviews, also called informal reviews. And these really can be customized as well. So Penny's going to talk about examples of that at her institution. But an internal review really can be designed to meet your institutional goals and your institutional needs, right? So this can come in a variety of ways and look very differently depending on the institution. Some institutions do internal reviews with certified peer reviewers, for example, who are at the institution, but it's just that it's not a formal review. It won't lead to certification, but they want to make sure that the feedback that's given on the review is really of high quality, and so they use certified peer reviewers. Other institutions use faculty or instructional designers, or a combination of faculty and IDs who usually have taken QMPD, may or may not be peer reviewers at the time. But again, it goes along with what your individual goals are and how continuous improvement really is looking and shaping up at your institution. That leads us into customized reviews, because there are some customized review options through QM. So not just at that institutional level with the internal reviews, but there's also some customized options that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. And then finally, probably the type of review that all of us are most familiar with, that formal certification review. So a formal review through Quality Matters. It could be QM managed or subscriber managed. We'll talk about those differences in a little bit, but it does lead to that certification. So the idea there is that you can do a mix and a match. You can scaffold these to achieve your internal goals, but these are all these options that are available to you to make things work in the best way for your institutional context and your institutional goals. The other way that we're going to talk about using the rubric and flexing the rubric is using the rubric for faculty development. So it could be, infusing the rubric with a design process, and that's part of faculty development. It's also through QM professional development for faculty, instructional designers, and administrators. So there's workshops on applying the rubric. There's the DYOC, designing your online course. So there's workshops for designing to meet QM standards, also workshops for online teaching. And what we've done here on this slide is to say that, again, you have lots of options here. There are workshops that are QM delivered. So even if you have a cohort group that you want to go through a workshop together, at the same time, you can still go through QM and do that. But also if you are a member, a full system member, or a member of a system like a state system, something such as that, you can also do a site license option. So again, for those of you that are looking at cost savings for the future and you really want to maximize your ability to deliver quality matters related professional development, you may want to look into the site license, because that allows you to certify a facilitator and then to continue to deliver certain select workshops at your own institution. So now we're going to go into twisting in action, and I'm going to turn it over to Penny, and she's going to talk more about the situation at Penn State.
Thanks, Bethany. Welcome, everyone. At Penn State, we use a combination of informal and formal reviews. We have a large population of instructional designers. Many, actually, I should say most, have received the APP QMR training, and many have also taken the PRC, the peer reviewer course. So we have a lot of very well-trained reviewers at Penn State. In terms of reviews, the first example I have here, informal with 2 to 3 reviewers. This might be a faculty and a designer pair who are working together to improve a course, or 2 designers who are supporting a course for a campus. And so the way we use that is, as the coordinator, I can set up a space for them. They can have a review team within the system, but not actually perform a full review, just using the worksheets to kind of record their findings and notes as they're working on a course. So that's the very informal version, I would say. And then in the middle there for informal, we do have an informal process that's all volunteer. So that does use all the tools in the review system, and there is a team of 3 individuals that review a course for a faculty member or for a lead designer at a program. So, and I'll get into the details of that a little later. And then of course there's the formal review that would be managed by QM. But that's a high level view of the types of reviews that we do. This is a macro view of the course development process. So the way we think about this is just how all the different ways that QM can fit within a course design and development process. So we can think about it at the beginning for a new program or a new course design. We think about it in the middle, after a course is offered, maybe right before a course is offered with the self-reviews. And then prior to a revision, we also use the rubric and QM review process there too. So we'll get into specific examples of these, but I just wanted to show you a macro view again of all the different places the QM rubric can be used within course design and development. So some specific examples. So at the start of a new program, that's a really good time to think about program design, meaning what should every course in the program have? And there's an opportunity there to set some standards and create templates or models with QM rubric baked into them, so that when individual courses start to be created, they have a consistency, they have a standard of quality, they have some shortcuts. So every course isn't being designed from scratch, right? You could create a set of program templates that all the courses will use. It could be as simple as a syllabus and what items should be included in the syllabus that will meet QM standards, or it could be more elaborate navigation system getting started that you can create a lot of standardized things that will help help the quality, but also help the scale. So that's important to keep in mind too. And I sometimes refer to this as design with the rubric in mind, right? How can you leverage the rubric at the start of the process? A few other examples here. I mentioned the checklist of new courses. So when you're working on a course, you could use the rubric as a checklist as you're designing it. It's also a very good thing for designers and faculty to use together while they're collaborating on a course design, because it gives them a common goal. They're both working toward meeting the standards, and so that helps with the collaboration. You could also do just a quick quality assurance check, self-review on your own after a course has been developed. Just check it against the rubric and see if you want to make any adjustments before it runs. And then the last example, we have a project going now about data-informed revision. And so we're gathering analytics from courses and other data, but also incorporating QM into that process to say, let's do a QM review or a focused subset of QM standards prior to a revision to inform the revision process before that starts. Many different ways to use the rubric. Here's a more of a diagram view of what I described. So you can see at the beginning, the program design where stakeholders are working together to really create templates and models that will be used for all courses in the new program. And then at the end of the process in course design and revision, faculty and IDs using the rubric to decide what's going to be revised in a course. And I saw in the chat, do we have a link to the PowerPoint? We are going to upload it. Yeah, you'll have access to all of this.
I'd just like to pop in and say that with all the great balloon animal pictures, that this has become a very, very large file. So I'm going to figure out how to compress all that so that it will upload. So that was the issue, but we will definitely get this up. So no worries there. All right,
Yeah,
back to Penny.
I could try to squeeze it down in a PDF. That might help too. So we can talk about that later. Okay, here's our 8 standards, right? So you have to have an octopus, right? So the full review, we look at this 2 different ways. We see there are 8 standards and 42 specific standards, 100 points in the 6th edition of the rubric right now. And if we want to target right in on the after the course is run, there are 2 ways that we do reviews at Penn State. So there's an internal review process, and they always have access to the QM managed review. Different departments or colleges or units. Penn State is so big, there are so many pockets of people using QM different ways. Some do QM managed review and some do the internal review process. So the internal review process is an all volunteer effort. So nothing is required of faculty to put their courses through QM. They volunteer their courses to be reviewed. And I mentioned before that we have a large population of designers who have been trained in QM, and they also volunteer to serve on review teams. So it is volunteer on both sides. And the way we do it is we use the full rubric and the tools in the CRMS as a formal process, but internally to Penn State. So we do have teams of 3 reviewers. They could be a mix. Mostly it's a mix of faculty and IDs on the review team. We're not always able to find a subject matter expert to serve in the group. So we kind of, in our internal process, we kind of set that to the side and let the team know that if there's something related to content that they're not sure about, that they should reach out to the faculty member who submitted the course to answer questions about that. And we kind of work it without having a subject matter expert all the time on the review team. We do 3 cycles a year in our internal process. So you can see the dates here when we have the open call for courses and review volunteers. Sometimes courses are submitted by designers. For example, if there is a situation where a department or a program runs courses, but they're taught by adjunct, the adjunct faculty might come and go for that course, but the designer is always the same. And so the designer may also submit a course for review if they're the lead designer for a course. And of course, work with any lead faculty that are also associated with it. So yeah, so we have the open call and you can see the dates there. The reason the dates are so wide, right? That's a long time to have a call open is this is also incorporated into the instructional designer's professional development plan for the year. And so a lot of times people need time to decide that they will do it. Maybe they need to take the training if they haven't had the training already. They need to clear it with their supervisor about when it will happen. And so we want to give folks plenty of time to plan about when they will have time to actually do this, because we all have day jobs and this is happening on top of that. So we want to give people as much time to plan as possible. And then you can see in the course review periods, these are also much longer than Quality Matters standard review estimate of how long it takes to review a course. If it was a QM managed review, these are much longer. We encourage people to take 3 to 4 weeks to do the review because again, they're trying to fit it in. And then having a window this large, it lets them meet as a team with the faculty member or the person submitting the course for review and actually figure out what schedule within that window will work for them. So we try to be as flexible as possible. We say we have 3 cycles a year. We have 3 large windows a year when this could occur. And people have found that to be very, very useful about being able to keep on track and finding time that works for everyone between vacations and other duties. So that's been successful. And then, as I mentioned before, they always have access to the QM Manage Review. At Penn State, if a department or a program wants to run their course through a QM Manage Review, they can do that at any time, and the funds come from their department or unit, whatever that might be. We don't have a central fund that pays for QM Manage Reviews, so they would do that on their own. And another thing we're doing, I'm collaborating with our faculty development unit on building some quality assurance courses or parts of courses for faculty development faculty who teach online. And so our ideas are to introduce the idea of quality assurance in general. Why is it important? And then we'll also be including how quality focuses on the design of the course and not a judgment of teaching or ability in that area, but it is really all about course design. And we also want to make them aware of all of the tools that are available to them through the QM website, all the different things they could do, and also include all the different ways QM could be used. So they don't have to do a full review. There are other options too, and different pieces of standards apply to different parts of the course. And so really letting them know that they can use it as much or as little as they like, but the common message is that it's important to consider quality assurance.
Okay, so on that note, talking about using the rubric for embedding it within the design process, embedding it within faculty development. One way to also twist it is to really think about using the rubric as a tool to really get faculty thinking about the design during the process. So as all of you know, the rubric is a tool for evaluation. It's not a tool for course design per se. But QM, if you didn't know, we now do have a tool for that, and it is free and it is public, and that is the Bridge to Quality Design Guide. And I see now that I put an extra T on the slide, so that's also why we didn't upload the slides. I'll fix it first. So it is the Bridge to Quality, and really this was designed because the members, all of you said, we just got through this period of the spring pivot to remote teaching. Many of you probably utilize the ERIC, the emergency remote instruction checklist, but now we want to move towards higher quality. We want to spend the summer, spend the fall continuing to improve these courses and really elevate the quality so that they're fully designed for online courses, not the remote courses really that all of us really had to deal with during the spring pivot. So this is a way to really bring the rubric, to bring in alignment, to bring in a lot of the best practices, the research supported ideas that are in the rubric into the design process and into your faculty development in a different way. Because the design guide has discrete design steps. So, you're listening to Penny talk, and if you're thinking, well, I don't even have instructional designers at my institution, how would I do these things? How would I have some of these faculty development opportunities? How would I create a design process? That's exactly what that design guide was designed to help you do. Okay, so it gives you a step-by-step process, and each of the design steps, so individual faculty can use it to design courses, but institutions can also use it to really kind of create a design process around it. Each design step is then aligned with a specific standard, right? So all of the specific standards, and there's a version for the higher education rubric, and there's also a version for the K-12 rubric. I'm putting the link here in the chat, and I hope this is the right link. If it's not, hopefully Penny or Irene's going to be able to help me out there. But we designed it really as like an ID at your elbow. So if you don't have a Penny, at least you do have the design guide coming soon. So we're going to release that in the next couple of weeks. We do have an updated version of the public version with culturally inclusive and reflective design steps, and also coming soon is a member only version with teaching considerations. So that's really going to expand what you can do, at your campus with faculty as well, because then you'll have something both for design and teaching. Okay, so there is a suite of options also for internal course review. So we talked about the self-review tool, and again, that is just connected to your My QM account. QMC is alerted when somebody starts a self-review, but they cannot see that self-review unless it's shared. So again, if you're at that place and you just want to do your own personal look at your course, start with that self-review tool. But there are also a host of options for internal reviews. So you can do internal reviews within the course review management system, just like Penny talked about. And those can really be geared towards what your institution is doing. You could choose who the reviewers are for that. But there's also options for reviews that are through QM that you can customize a little bit more. And I'm going to talk about each of these a little bit. QM Essentials is one of them, and My Custom Reviews, or My CR, is another one. Now, the benefit of these self-reviews, the internal reviews, and then these two options through QM Essentials and My CR, is you're not required to follow the official QM process, right? So if you're thinking, well, we only want to use select standards, or we really have not yet built up a peer reviewer pool at our institution, or we're just ramping up in terms of investment for these reviews, that doesn't mean that you can't start working with QM and start working with the rubric right now just because you're not ready for a formal review. So you have these host of options, and a lot of them really sync very nicely with QM professional development, so they can help you prepare for these reviews. Because the whole idea here is that you're preparing and you're ramping up, you're continuously improving those courses, so that by the time you are ready for a formal certification review, you are, have a sense of confidence that a lot of those standards are going to be met. So all of this is available as a part of your membership. The rubric is flexible. Right, so the rubric itself is flexible. It's not just the usage of the rubric that's flexible, but one important point that I really wanted to convey today is that the rubric itself is flexible. So look to those annotations. Those annotations, first and foremost, provide you some examples of ways that that standard can be met. But also realize that that is not the exhaustive list of ways that that standard can be met. It just gives you some ideas. So if you have faculty that are, coming to QM and maybe they're newer, or maybe, they really haven't been part of the conversation up to this point, and they only see the standards. So maybe they don't actually have the rubric. They just see the list of standards. They may come away with a false notion that, well, this is very prescriptive, or this doesn't reflect my course, right? Because a lot of the ways that the standards can flex and the ways that you can flex to meet them are really contained within those annotations. So it's important to have that conversation with faculty that there is no one way to meet any particular standard. This is not about making cookie cutter courses. This is about allowing individual faculty the freedom to create high quality courses that reflect best practices and research in instructional design and online learning. Right. So the other thing to really emphasize in the rubric is that it is focused on application and engagement and presence and interaction. The reason that I put that as a separate bullet point is because, especially after, we got through the spring remote pivot and we had all of those remote instruction courses and a lot of faculty doing amazing things, doing the best that they can with a very tough situation, and they moved to that synchronous teaching. That's when a lot of primarily face-to-face faculty started to feel disconnected. And they started to think, I'm really not engaging with my students in the same way. I don't feel present in the same way. I don't know how to apply these same things via Zoom as I did in the classroom. The rubric can help with that because it is infused with interaction, engagement. General Standard 5 is a big one for that, but it also reflects, for example, the facets of the community of inquiry framework. So your social presence, teaching presence, and cognitive presence, those are embedded in the rubric. And I think that's an important conversation to have as well. The other way that it's flexible is the rubric is technology and LMS agnostic. So it doesn't matter if you're using D2L, Canvas, Moodle, Teams, Brightspace, any one of those. It doesn't matter because it's about using the technology and the technology tools well to support your pedagogical goals, right? To support student learning. So there is nothing in the rubric that says you cannot use Quality Matters or engage with Quality Matters because you use this particular technology. The other thing to keep in mind is that meeting standards does not equal standardization. So when I said before that the goal is not cookie cutter courses, it's high quality courses, there is a distinct difference between meeting standards and standardizing courses and standardizing learning, right? This is a crucial conversation to have with faculty. So those of you that are faculty and you're on the line here, I hope that this resonates with you. Not every course is going to be the same. You're teaching different things. Your students are different. Your pedagogical approaches are different, but all of those things can be reflected and work with the standards. So you can conduct focus reviews using QM Essentials, and you can also then customize reviews with MyCR. So this is a place to twist and flex, QM Essentials. And type in the chat if any of you have heard of QM Essentials or if you've done this so far at your institution. I think this is a great option, actually. This is a great place to start because it does include all of the 3-point essential standards within the rubric. But beyond that, an institution could choose to include additional standards from the rubric. They could choose to include standards from their institution. And if it meets those 3-point essential standards, then you have the opportunity of creating this logo. So the example of the logo is there on the screen. You would replace the name of your organization or institution where it says name of organization, and you get to create a custom logo. So this is an achievement. This is a milestone. And if you're not ready for those formal reviews, but you still want some type of internal certification or validation that means something to your institution and that you have already positioned as a pathway to continuous improvement, QM Essentials, I think, is going to fit the bill for you. So I'm going to take a moment here to see in the chat if anybody has done QM Essentials. So many of you have heard about it. Steve saying you're working to implement QM Essentials at your institution at University of Akron. You're thinking about it, okay. And so Nikki's saying you've incorporated those 3 points into the accelerated review rubric. Absolutely. Okay. And thank you, Marianne, for posting that link in the chat. I appreciate it. And then moving on to my CR, so my custom reviews, this really allows you to create a custom rubric for your institution. So you could include or remove specific review standards. You could add in additional standards for your institution. You could add in standards that are related to your accreditation. You could add in standards that are specific to a program. You could add in standards or policies that are relevant to a particular course. This is full flexibility, okay? So you can adjust points, make things required and not, and this also can be done through my QM, through your membership. There's also the option to do rubric subsets, and I'm going to give 2 examples of this in a minute. So you can do this through my CR. If you're including the essentials, you can do this as QM essentials, but you could also do this in a very informal way. Okay, so I know institutions that deal with subsets of their rubric because they really are kind of ramping up to that full review, and they choose not to use the MyCR. They choose not to use the MyQM system, and they facilitate it and they manage it in different ways. So this is a great option if you want to focus only on certain standards, and we'll give you some examples of why you might want to do that or why it makes sense in just a minute. But one thing to take away here is this can be less intimidating than the full rubric. Okay, so a lot of institutions, when the spring pivot happened, again, there were institutions that maybe did not have a focus on online learning, and all of a sudden it is on their radar in new ways. For those of us that have been in online learning for a long time, we now had a new influx of students who were not ready to be successful online learners. We had a new set of faculty who maybe never wanted to teach online, and here they were teaching remotely. So what I'm saying though is we had a new population, and frankly, online learning can be overwhelming. Online learning can be overwhelming because you need to have different teaching strategies. You need to design your courses differently. And even if you're a faculty member that really knew instructional design and you were teaching face-to-face, there's now still the whole thing where you have to develop items as digital content. You have to upload them in a learning management system. You have to organize them well, pay attention to navigation, make sure everything is accessible. And so what I'm saying is this is a tall order. If you're starting and this is brand new and all, online learning and designing courses is newer to you, it's a lot. So one way to make it a little bit more doable is to chunk it up and make it less intimidating by focusing only on certain sections first, right? So some institutions do that they might have a course layout. It's sometimes called a course template, course framework that maybe has good navigation, and that gets faculty started without impinging at all on their design choices. But the idea here is to save people time, to make it manageable not only for their time and their effort, but also cognitively manageable. Frankly, when I first got into online learning, I had been teaching for several years face-to-face. I started to move online. I realized how much I didn't know. This was a whole new world. And when I found QM and the first time I read through that rubric, I just felt like I would never get there, that there was just too much to learn, too much to do, and I just felt it was an impossible climb. So this kind of makes it easier for people to kind of wrap their heads around so that you can meet your strategic goals in a way that makes sense for you and your institution. So one way that you might want to do that is to first look at the 8 general standards and start where you are. Right. Frankly, there are some on here that are more doable than others if you're starting from scratch. General Standard 1 and General Standard 7, for example. So General Standard 1 is sort of welcome to class. It's the first day, introducing yourself, having your students introduce themselves. General Standard 7 is all about supporting students with accessibility, technology, academic services, student support. So those are just 2 examples, but you can choose to start on a specific standard if you want, a specific general standard. Diving in and giving a more specific example, and I know a lot of institutions take this approach. At Penny's institution, they do this as well. This is an example where we've given a subset of things that are probably in most of your syllabi, and you can use this as a syllabus check. So do students know what the purpose of the course is? Do they know what prerequisites they need in order to enroll and continue in the course? Do they know what technology skills they'll need? What's the grading policy? What are other course policies that they need? Are there links to resources and support? Course objectives, maybe an overview of activities, how they are to communicate, requirements for interaction. All of these things, right, they're typically in the syllabus. So even if a faculty member starts with revising their syllabus for online learning, and many institutions even have a type of syllabus template that really just gives some guidance and placeholders for faculty to fill in the way that makes sense for them for their particular course, and really get the syllabus done as the first order of business and really meet a lot of standards through that. Okay, so that's one good example. You can also customize it to do an alignment check. So the alignment standards are listed here, and especially if you are first focusing on that good foundational design, which I really highly suggest that you do. And that means starting with alignment, your measurable active objectives, deciding what your assessments are going to be so that students can provide evidence they've achieved those objectives, what materials you're going to include in your course so students could do well on those assessments. And then finally, adding in that interaction and that technology, right? That extra thinking that we have to do for online. So how are students really going to cognitively engage with the material, with one another, with me as the instructor? And then finally, what technology am I going to use to support those efforts? So these are the big alignment standards shown here. And that's another good way to dive into the rubric in a doable way, carving that out as that foundational design piece. And then you can move on to some other things that would surround and support that. The other way to flex is also talk to faculty about their alternative approaches. I've had a lot of good conversations, and QM has had a lot of good conversations recently with faculty that have come to us and saying, well, can I do this with the rubric? Well, here's my approach. Does that work with the rubric? And truthfully, a lot of times it may not be apparent how your approach can work with the rubric, especially if you're newer to quality matters, if you really have not had an opportunity yet to dive into some of that professional development, to really learn about the rubric. There's a lot of this can't work for me sort of feelings, right? So I'm here to say it can. And if you're not sure how it can, this is a good place to reach out to folks like Penny, your instructional designers, your QMCs at your campus, and also to us at Quality Matters. So if you're doing a problem-based learning design, for example, or your course is more experiential in nature, maybe you're doing co-constructed learning outcomes with your student. It's a graduate level course or it's an honors course, and that's part of the thinking that you want your students to do. Maybe you have a different type of policy for grading, like you're doing ungrading or something. You can still create high quality courses that work with Quality Matters and the standards and everything that's reflected within the rubric. So just as one example there for ungrading. Well, ungrading still is a type of grading, right? And really it'd be a matter of going through that, 3.2 and 3.3 and explaining to students, well, what is ungrading? What does it mean? How will you be evaluated? And how are you as a student going to be part of that? Because ungrading is a collaborative type of effort, but it still absolutely can work. The key here is to provide guidance and explanation. So it still is clarity, right? So for those of you maybe that aren't as familiar with how the review process works, reviewers are asked to take the student perspective, right? So even though it is a peer review, it is done by your peers, they still come to that with all the newness that your students do as well, right? And they still want to understand, well, what is, for example, ungrading? How will I be evaluated? And my guess is that if you're using that, as a course policy and approach, that's already in your course. So provide that guidance and explanation, provide artifacts and evidence, and at the end of the day, you know your students well. Right? So again, you're looking for that clarity of expectations, clarity of instructions, so that even if you're using maybe a policy or an approach that's a little bit different than other faculty at your institution, students still know what to expect. That's the key there. Students know where they're going in terms of their learning, what their learning goals and objectives are. They know how they will be evaluated. They know how to communicate with you and their peers. So it really is about that clarity of expectations. So we do also have some resources here for you. Penn State has really a very good QM page, qualitymatters.psu.edu. We've also listed their course development guide for you. I'm going to add the link to the QM Bridge Guide as well as the ERIC, the Emergency Remote Instruction Checklist. I'll add that to these slides as well. QM Ohio, so I'm formerly from QM Ohio. Hi, everybody from Ohio. We also have a course review guide there, and that is publicly available. So these are things that are member resources that can help you, right? And this also, I think, brings to bear one of the other really important takeaways is that QM is such a robust, helpful community, so that if you're thinking, how do I get this started at my community? You can reach out to folks like Penny and say, how did you get this started? At my previous institution, just to piggyback on what Penny said earlier, I wanted to pick up on. She mentioned that doing internal reviews can also be really part of instructional designer professional development and training. And I would really like to underscore that as well. At my previous institution, that's exactly how we used it. So in that way, it really became something that served so many purposes towards the goal of continuous improvement and quality online learning. So we would have our instructional designers take the applying the QM rubric workshop. We would also have them take the peer reviewer course. Now, some of them could become peer reviewers because they're also adjunct instructors. But for us, it was more important that they really knew how to apply the rubric, what went into the rubric, right? So we also had an option for faculty to volunteer for internal reviews. At my previous institution, there was no requirements for those internal reviews. And we then used that as fodder for discussion with the IDs, and we would go through the standards. They would look at the courses. And then when there was things where I'm not sure, does this meet the standard? I'm not sure how to give feedback to improve this, or what's the best, that maybe that we could do here in terms of a recommendation. That became a conversation. Right. And through that also, we began to kind of tease out, well, what are some of the common problems that we're seeing across the institution? Can we take care of that, for example, by creating a syllabus template or creating an LMS template, something that would make this easier for faculty, that would help out instructional designers, and would also make quality scalable at an institution, because that's often a barrier. If you don't have necessarily the human resources or other resources, always think in terms of scalability. How can I do the best that I can with what I have? So because we embedded that within the instructional designer process, instructional designers grew in leaps and bounds. They became amazing internal reviewers. Again, some of them peer reviewers because they were also instructors. Those faculty got feedback. We improved the courses. We readied them for then a formal certification review down the road. Special thanks. Penny, do you want to say the special thanks?
Sure. Thanks to Pearson Newt's Full of Hot Air, who twisted the balloons that were featured in our presentation today. I just wanted to give him a shout out and thank you for creating all those balloons for us, especially the octopus, which was amazing.
Yes, I had never seen anything like that. That is awesome. And finally, our contact information. So please follow up with it if you have any questions about anything that we talked about today, or you want to talk about the particular culture and context at your institution. We do have looks about 7 minutes left, so I am going to stop share and come back to the chat, and I'm going to see if we have any questions, or if any of you want to unmic and ask a question. We definitely have time for that.
While folks are thinking about that, I just wanted to mention about the resources that New Mexico State University Course Developer Guide. If you're interested in program templates or course development templates with the rubric baked in, they've already done a lot of the work. Actually, they've done all of the work, and they're opening that up for people for free. They just have it free on their website. So if you're interested in the template aspect of it, definitely check that out. And I'll put the link in the chat too, so you don't have to wait for the slides.
Thank you. There, right? Awesome. So Brenda, I see that you have answered Amita. Are you able to unmic and fully answer that question? I know I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Hi, Brenda.
Hi, thanks for having me. Amita, yes, we have a 2-hour web conferencing workshop. It's called Creating Discussion Board Rubrics, but you can make them for anything. It goes over like the different types of grading rubrics there are, and it focuses on creating one for a discussion board. And it's a 2-hour web conferencing workshop. It's held in Zoom, and you have like a minimum of 10 people up to 20 people in the session. So we do it as a synchronous online session. I'll find the link and post it in the chat here for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. And is that like a free Zoom session, or is that something that you sign up for? And because yesterday I did actually attend one of the sessions that was on discussions. That was more a third-party tool kind of a session, like a pretzel for the discussions for active learning. But I was just interested listening to all this, and I have a course and I've gone through the quality matters, but I would like to learn a little bit more about rubrics. So
sure, this is a web conferencing workshop, and so it is your institution would generally organize it, and if you're in I'm not sure what institution you're with, but you can, if you want to pull others together, that's a really great thing to do. We have but this is a paid workshop. It's not a free like a success story. So it's one of our web conferencing workshops. So I'll put a link in the chat for more information.
okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
And Marianne, you have a good question. I'm going to answer that as well. And then Penny, I'm going to turn it over to you, but how you got faculty to volunteer for review service. I can say that I know that some of the top ways are, and some of the ways that I've done this at previous institutions is sometimes we would pay faculty, pay for their peer reviewer course and the APP QMR. And so they were getting professional development. They were getting a certification and a role. And in exchange for that, we had asked for a review. In other cases, for faculty that chose to volunteer for internal reviews, they were then first in line for the formal review. So we had a budgeted amount. We had, courses that were sort of in a line. So they kind of went to the front of the line for that. And there was also just a lot of faculty that were interested in this and they wanted the feedback. And these were also good faculty to connect with because they are your early adopters, they are your superstars. And really it's about making this a good positive process for faculty. It's not just about the course. It definitely is about students. It's also about the faculty and making sure that this is a good and positive experience. So for those early volunteers that said, well, you don't have to give me anything. I just want the feedback and to make a better course. We always highlighted their experience. We had them talk to other faculty, and that really was a way also to move forward with implementation. But Penny, how do you do it at Penn State?
Yeah, for us, it was very similar. We don't have an incentive or anything like that. There is a within our advisory committee that we have, there's some discussion on how could we make QM part of the tenure and retention? Like, could it be designated as course improvement or professional development for faculty? So we are working on a way to fit that in as an incentive. But other than that, Marianne, you hit the main point there, is that they're just genuinely interested in improving the quality of their courses. And so when they start hearing about QM and we have access to the tools, they're anxious to submit a course and see what feedback they get. They're very interested in getting feedback, especially that it's based on research. That's a really strong point with our faculty, as I'm sure it is with yours as well. Yeah, they're just genuinely interested in getting the feedback and making improvements.
And just to reinforce that as well, when we started doing internal reviews at the previous institutions I worked at, we also at that point made a point to collect more student feedback about those courses. So we inserted extra questions just about the design, not about the teaching, that were not on those student evaluations of instruction. And once we started sharing that student feedback, those faculty really did. They said, boy, I'm getting all this good student feedback. They know how to navigate the course. I'm getting less questions, so it's reduced time for me. I'm seeing improved learning. that was worth everything in the world in terms of getting other faculty on board, because they wanted that positive response. They wanted their students to have a positive, engagement with them in online learning. And actually, there's a lot of faculty that will come just for that, because faculty are, yeah.
I also want to mention too, I put a link in the chat from Alyssa Sell's QM marketing ideas from her Minute to Win It session last year.
Awesome.
If you're trying to get faculty interested in QM, that has a ton of ideas.
Awesome. Any final questions? I know we're at time, but also we do have our emails there. Please feel free to reach out to us. Madeline is saying, tapping into their interest and motivation to not only design, but also develop on their own to meet their own timeline, not in collaboration with an ID. Absolutely. That timeline there, I think, is one of the biggest reasons maybe to start with those self or internal reviews, right? We're all a little bit swamped right now. I think that's a safe thing to say. We're all a little bit swamped and overwhelmed. And maybe the timeline that's involved in a formal review with that, 14-week period for amendments and whatnot, maybe that's not doable right now. Start with an internal review, because you can lengthen, that revision as long as you need to, based on what else is going on.
Yeah. And we've seen people progress from self-review to informal review to formal QM managed review. So it is a pathway.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with that, I want to thank you all so much for attending today. It was great to spend this time with you. Again, good to see all these familiar faces, even if I can't be with you in person. Did you actually make that during it?
I did while you were talking. It turned out as a dog, but I think it's more of maybe a coati. The tail's a little long. But.
That's fantastic. Penny, you never cease to amaze. She does have all the talents of that's right. Hashtag mad skills with a Z, Steve Kaufman. You got it.
Thank you, ladies, so much. That was a great presentation.
Thanks
I hope everyone
for coming.
has a great day.
We'll see you all later.